Okay, so when you hear the name Kalinga, chances are one single, incredibly bloody event pops into your head. But that's kind of like knowing a person by only their worst day. We're going to dive into this because the true story of this ancient Indian kingdom is so much bigger, more resilient, and way more influential than you might think. But yeah, we have to start with the number that defined Kalinga for centuries: 100,000. According to Emperor Ashoka's own records, that's how many people were killed when he conquered Kalinga. And get this, that number doesn't even include the hundreds of thousands more who died later. It was just a staggering loss of life, even for that time.
So you gotta ask, right? What made this one war so incredibly devastating? And how in the world did such a brutal conflict lead to one of the most profound personal and political changes in all of history? Well, to answer that, we need to look at what Kalinga was before the war.
See, Kalinga wasn't some minor kingdom that just got rolled over. No way. It was a major power, a wealthy, formidable kingdom on the eastern coast of India that stood right in the path of the massive Mauryan Empire.
So what was the big deal? Why did the Mauryan Emperor Ashoka want Kalinga so badly? Well, it was a strategic jewel. Kalinga controlled the absolutely vital sea trade routes to Southeast Asia, it had a bunch of important ports, and a powerful navy to back it all up. For the Mauryans, it was this massive obstacle and a huge prize, all rolled into one.
And here's the thing, Kalinga had a history of fighting back. Ashoka wasn't the first Mauryan emperor to try and take it. His own grandfather, the legendary founder of the empire, Chandragupta Maurya, had tried, and he failed. Kalinga knew how to defend its home turf.
But in 261 BC, Ashoka, who was determined to succeed where his grandfather couldn't, brought the full, overwhelming force of his empire down on Kalinga. This wasn't just another battle, this was an all-out campaign of total conquest. And the cost, which Ashoka himself wrote down in his famous rock edicts, was just horrific. There's that number again, 100,000 killed in the fighting itself, but his edicts also say that several 100,000 more died from disease and famine after the war, and a mind-boggling 150,000 were captured and taken away. The kingdom was completely and utterly devastated. Now, seeing this level of carnage up close had a really profound and, honestly, a pretty much unprecedented effect on the guy who ordered it. That victory, it broke something inside Ashoka, and it led to one of history's most famous changes of heart. Ashoka was apparently so horrified about what he'd done that he just completely renounced his entire policy of military aggression. He went from being a conqueror to a protector and started focusing on the welfare of all living things in his empire. It was a complete 180. Before the war, Mauryan policy was all about military conquest. Simple. After the war, Ashoka brought in this whole new philosophy, Dharma Vijaya, which means victory through righteousness and non-violence. A total reversal. And this new approach, it actually worked. It led to over 4 decades of peace and prosperity for the empire. But, there was a downside. This long period of peace meant the army was neglected, and after Ashoka died, the empire was weaker. It was one of the things that led to its eventual collapse. And right here, this is where most histories of Kalinga just stop. A tragic end, a catalyst for an emperor's change of heart. But that is not the end of the story. Not even close. Because, and this is the really amazing part, Kalinga rose again. Its defeat was just a chapter, not the final word. In fact, you could argue the kingdom's greatest legacy was still to come, and it would stretch far, far beyond the shores of India. So how do we know this? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is something called the Hathi Gumpha inscription. It's basically an autobiography carved in stone by a later king, Kharavela. He ruled Kalinga after the Mauryan Empire started to fade, and this inscription details all his military wins and public projects. It's proof that Kalinga was back in business as a major power. And this wasn't just some brief comeback story. No. Centuries later, Kalinga's power hit a whole new peak under the Suryavamshi Gajapati dynasty. Their name literally meant Lord of Elephants, which gives you a pretty good hint about their military strength. And that strength was absolutely staggering. A historian from a rival kingdom wrote that his own ruler's 200 elephants were nothing, literally nothing, compared to the Gajapati king's force of 200,000. I mean, that's 1,000 times larger. Just an unbelievable display of power. But Kalinga's real superpower? It was the ocean. Its influence was so huge that the Bay of Bengal was actually known as the Kalinga Sagara, the Sea of Kalinga. The rulers even took the title Mahodadipati, King of the Oceans. And for good reason.
Their ships completely dominated trade with Southeast Asia, connecting India to the rich islands of Java, Sumatra, and beyond.
And this wasn't just about money, it was cultural. The influence of Kalinga just rippled out across the entire region. In Java, people were known as the Kling race. In Burma, a region was named after Odisha, which is Kalinga's later name. The very first kingdom in the Maldives? Yeah, founded by a prince from Kalinga. And the super powerful Shailadra dynasty in Java? It very likely had its roots in Kalinga too.
And what's so cool is that this incredible maritime history isn't just stuff you read about in old books. It's a living tradition. Every single year, the state of Odisha celebrates the Bali Yatra Festival, which directly commemorates those ancient voyages to Bali and all those other islands. It's a vibrant echo of a seafaring golden age.
So yeah, Kalinga is often remembered for that one devastating defeat. But its true legacy, it's one of resilience, revival, and incredible global influence. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other stories in history are we missing just because we only focus on that one famous event?